Hey there, this is Jeff Hasen. And I really appreciate it, Hank, that you asked me to talk to your students again. I will say a few things right off the bat. First off, as I've said every time I've appeared in front of your classes, students, respectfully, you don't know how good you have it. There's nobody better, in my opinion, than Hank. Hank leads with his heart, has feelings and compassion for folks, and he's smart as heck. So I really hope you're taking advantage of all of the opportunities and all the learnings that you have with Hank. And I encourage you, because I know you're going to have a long standing relationship with him long after your class is over. I encourage you to really be a sponge like I am and learn what you can from Hank. Secondly, I want to apologize for the clothes that I'm wearing. I'm actually living in Seattle. I haven't taken fleece off in about 3 weeks. We've had 20 inches of snow. Normally, I think we've had 20 inches of snow in my 19 years here. So we're kind of living like we're in the Midwest, shoveling and living in fleece. So let me see if I can answer some of the questions that Hank sent to me. I apologize if I take my eyes off the screen a couple times to look down and make sure. So the first one was, what will be the biggest challenges or changes in marketing communications in the next 3 years? I think this one, I look at it from a tech perspective and a consumer perspective. I see more interfaces, more behaviors, more technologies, but also, importantly, I see more expectations from consumers. And as I've said before, and I've written in a couple of books, people like my mother-in-law, who's soon to be 90 years old, are among those who have these really big expectations. They expect things to work, to be intuitive. And the true story that I tell often, my mother-in-law was playing Angry Birds on her iPhone. And she asked me how come she couldn't stop and pick up the game in progress on her iPad. And I had to laugh because she was in her mid-80s at the time. But that's the expectations that we all have, and that's the advice that I often give brands, is to really grasp onto the concept of high expectations being raised even higher. The next thing, what excites me about marketing communications today, I think it's the change. When I interview folks, I ask them what kind of role are they looking to be in. You know, there are some people who want to know exactly what they're going to do every day, every week, every month. The working world is hardly like that. I can't really mention a job that fits that bill that I know about. So if you're looking for a job where it's like the train is going to hit the station every day at 11:02 in the morning and then leave at 11:04, that's really not the world of the working world that we live in. And I look to embrace that rather than to be afraid of it. Third, what frustrates me or annoys me about marketing communications is simply the idea that sometimes folks are working from an old playbook. The world of marketing, communications, and technology is moving so fast that it frustrates me to no end when people are using old stats, using old case studies, using old personas, when really the world is moving at a pace where you need to be vigilant about making sure that your information is current. What's the most important business lesson that I learned? I remember this one distinctly. The boss that I had, to this day, I consider my favorite boss and somebody I learned more from than anybody else. He bounced me out of his office one day and he said, come back to me when you have a solution, because I had presented a problem to him. And even though I was senior at the time, this was a lesson that I had not learned to that date. And it really, the world, frankly, is full of a lot of problem identifiers. And to be as valuable as you can be to an organization, I think we need to become problem solvers. Think back 5 years, did I envision the job that I have today? I've probably had 3 jobs in the last 5 years. I started out as a sports writer. I got into the agency world because I thought everybody could write. Little did I know that wasn't the case. So I got into the agency world, first in PR, then in marketing. But I've had 5 or 6 or 7, honestly, different jobs, and I'm sure I'll have a few more before I'm done. How did I develop the skill of speaking? So I've spoken, fortunately, over 200 times around the world. I don't pretend to be a master of it. Hank is awesome on stage. I don't know if you've seen any of his appearances or his talks. They're awesome. The advice I would give you is to practice. The best presentation that I've ever given happened recently. I work at an agency called Possible. It was a presentation to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And for a variety of reasons, including the fact that I didn't write this presentation, I was only asked to present it. I practiced it out loud, I'm not kidding, probably 30 times over the course of about a 4-day period. Now, it got to the point where it became somewhat natural for me, and I knew exactly where I was going. I knew what was coming next. And probably the best part of it is I was more confident about my content than I ever had been before. So I would suggest doing that. What would I suggest you be doing to prepare for life after USC? Couple things. One, network. And I know that you're doing that. Several of you have reached out to me on LinkedIn, follow me on Twitter. I appreciate that. And there's nothing like connections. And again, Hank is a master teacher when it comes to connections. And as I'm sure you know, Hank is a giver, not a taker. So when you're networking, you want to give. And it'll come back to you in spades, but what you want to do is make sure that you're not out there with your hand out. The other thing I would suggest is to find your passion. That's a cliche, but there are some things that get you up in the morning, get you out of bed and get excited, and there are other things that you kind of really don't want to do. I like writing. I like creating content, so I'm about to finish my 3rd book. It has been a lot more work on this 3rd one than I had remembered on the first 2, but I'm passionate about content creation, and it gets me out of bed and gets me working really early. Finally, one final piece of advice, I would say be humble. I'll point to somebody who, I live in Seattle. One of the smartest marketers I know in Seattle is somebody who I never want to work with again. Because one time, more than once actually, but I remember one time specifically, he was in a meeting with us and he said, started a sentence with, "Now here's a great idea." Now, with all due respect, I think it's up to the people in the room to determine if it is or if it isn't, rather than somebody self-evaluating and telling you how smart he or she is. So I would say humble is something that's going to serve you both in the business world, but I think just in general. So Hank, I appreciate this opportunity. I probably went long, which isn't the first time. I really encourage you to, again, learn everything you can from this man and reach out to me if there's anything I could do to help. Thanks.